Women's Power to Heal Mother Earth. I am Maya Tawari. Being true to yourself, to your shifting emotions, to feelings and sufferings. As long as we remain aware-ful of our state of mind and being, we are doing well. In these perilous times, we need to learn how to allow hurt, angst, fears to find their organic way out of our system. And one of the tried and true ways from the beginning of time of humanity has been to stay present with our emotions. Staying present does not mean that we do nothing else but sit and be present, although that's very good to do. It simply means that we need to acknowledge however we are feeling, perhaps first thing in the morning when we awaken. And apart from the mood, what we are experiencing, that takes 10 seconds to say, I am feeling anxious or hurt or ill at ease or something is just not right. Leave it there. Continue with your morning ablutions, whatever they may be. And then sometime in the mid-morning after you finish the urgent tasks that always await us, you may take 10 minutes to sit and breathe and simply ask for you to become present to your emotions, however and whatever they may be. When we're feeling depressed and recognize that we are depressed, then we're doing well. I want you to have a newer, more ancient definition of wellness. It isn't about feeling on top of the world. It is simply about being true and honest to the self, to the being, exactly as it is. But first we must know how to get there. It's there, it's present, it's always there. But we need to step back, slow down, speed up, whatever we need to do in order to be there with these feelings as they unfold, and they do unfold. They unfold with us or without us. We live in a time juxtaposed between the two polarized pillars. One is the old, inured, politico, patriarchal ideology of chaos, control, and manipulation, and the other is the pillar of New Age theories, many of which are progressive and helpful, but many of which are also not helpful and can be outrightly detrimental to the mental and emotional processing for wellness. Now, this may come as a surprise for most of you because you all know that I am in the holistic field. I've been for the last 45 years of service with the work of Ayurveda, and that for me to talk about New Age theories sound like the far right, but it isn't about far right or far left. It's about being in the center space of who we are as human beings that need to oftentimes console ourselves, that need to unwrap the compassion for what we are going through. And first off, we need to know more or less what that feeling or experience is about. We may not know all of the parameters for it and all of the definitions for it, and that's all right. We owe it to ourselves to be aware of what we are feeling and to allow ourselves the necessary space to address it and to stay open with it. Now, many of you may know from my previous podcasts and my other writings that have been targeted for the past 11 years. And trust me, what I'm saying to you has been, in fact, a saving grace that I'm still here, able to stand up and breathe and speak to you in this intimate way. For many of us, taking that slower pace, that pause, is so difficult. But it must become an organic part of our day, because the greatest therapist we have is within ourselves when we are able to just be with whatever that feeling may be. You don't have to explain yourself or apologize for how you feel ever. If you want to examine where those feelings are coming from, then that's your first pathway to a solution. But keep in mind, there are issues that may not have an immediate resolve. Most major issues do not. So we are asked to live in the question of it all, rather than striving for beating ourselves up to find answers, which, if we do find them, may be premature, may not be the complete answer, and keep us farther away from the solution. Keep observing your innermost reaction and feelings. But don't do it fanatically, or because we are trained to feel guilty about what we're supposed to feel and what a perfect life for us may look like, or because someone dismisses us or shames us or disapprove of how you are faring or feeling. That's their problem, not yours. We live in a world where simple communion, the dialogue between two people, truth sharing amongst ourselves, family and community, and the heart-to-heart is becoming more complex and difficult to do. Pushed and preyed on by political, social media manipulations, reframed and warped at every turn, we must stand firmly in and by the truth of our feelings. In these times of multiple challenges overriding daily routines, we may scramble to prioritize what is the most important thing we can do. Buying into the misinformation of what activates or constitutes self-love and self-care can defeat the very energy, the very inspiration, the very sense of wellness, whether or not we are well. We must sustain awareness to make it through a perilous day. Self-awareness. I am not dismissing self-love and self-care, but I'm simply saying that there's so much guilt attached to what the ideology of self-love and self-care is about today in our New Age paragon of virtues and lack of virtues and whatever, lack of dharma and dharmas. We are so tossed and turned as to what this is about that oftentimes trying to meet the ends and beginnings of these self-care programs and self-care practices bring on instead a great deal of stress and guilt. When we believe that we must stick to a certain so-called healthy routine, regardless of circumstances by its tenacious nature dismisses all of these belief systems and forward-moving energy. When we become present with these difficult circumstances, we no longer find ourselves stagnated or debilitated. Now stay with me. We're talking about staying present. We're not talking about the most amazing meditation practices. We're not talking about several hours a day. We're talking about the moment to moment. Let me check in with myself. It only takes 20 seconds for me to say, Maya, how are you feeling right now? Well, Well, in my case, actually, from this yesterday morning, I woke up drugged and gassed as I normally am these days from the impairment and incursions that happen in my own private space, which has not been private for the last 10 years, surrounded as I am by so many elements and so many violent activities, that I looked out of the window, barely able to see. I was blurred from sleeping gases and whatever else were pummeling in. It smelled like diesel fumes and something noxious, only to look out of the window and see the humongous machine that sweeps and cleans the street stop right in front of my home and making a tremendous amount of noise as it sat in one position. It's a huge, big, monstrous machine with the big, huge red letters called Elgin on it. And then there was a sweeper, another machine, smaller, that was sort of circling about ahead of it, looking like they were cleaning the road. But in fact, as I walked up closer to them, it really does become, when you become aware of how you're feeling and be present with what's going on, it becomes sadly hilarious. And as I walked up to it, I noticed he was pouring water from the bottom of his machine onto cleaning out some toxic diesel fume that had been dropped there through the night from the onslaughts and assaults that generally happen around my premise, the home, wherever I am. But it's not about the endurance of it all. It's about the nature of how we respond to it all. I am not denying that these things happen. They do happen. And I'm not afraid to speak to them and speak about them, loud and clear. It is time we bust open the entire shadow, the entire set of facades that have been built around it for targeted individuals to make them look crazy and delusional and paranoid and whatever else. It's time we break through all of that, because that's just part of the patriarchal control that must be felled. It is time for it all to go to smithereens, and people like myself are talking about it so that we can become more aware of these things happening. And what we may look at as a great monstrosity, as I said, can become a great dark comedy. Now, it is incredible that these humongous machines actually thought that they were going to be secretized in the wide open. But we look at life in a way of our own. How do we respond? What is my feelings? What am I feeling from this all? So getting back to being present, getting back to having no guilt about how we are feeling. We've become accustomed to routines, or else we've lost ourselves. I hear women saying all the time, I've not been taking care of myself like I used to, or I feel so ashamed I've just dropped my healthy routine, or I've got to get back to my healthy practices. Guilt. And it helps none of us. It helps no one. A most unhelpful thought process. When you're told repeatedly that you should be doing certain things, that you should maintain a disciplined life, that you should do your daily self-love cares, and that you should do this or do that, what happens is when we begin to pile on the guilt of what we have not been doing in terms of the rituals we are accustomed to, or practices that we would normally do in gentler times. When we skip our routines that were normally helpful daily practices, we must bring awareness to why we're skipping the routine. Am I too tired? Am I feeling sad, depressed, listless, or simply non-inspired? What is happening in my environment, my home? How is my heart and my work? How are they feeling? And they meaning me. A recent example of someone who shared with me, I feel so bad about not doing da-da-da-da-da-da. When queried as to her circumstance, her young boy was diagnosed with COVID positive the day before Christmas. Already tired from an intensive year-long workload, she was feeling frazzled. Her oldest son was told he had to be quarantined for 2 weeks because his brother tested positive for the virus. Well, what does she do? Of course, you're not going to be able to keep to your normal self-healing practices that you would do under tender, more loving circumstances. Each day for the past year, I have confronted one toxic experience after another, as I've just shared. And so we look, being present, being aware-ful, being able to flow in the conscious stream of precisely where we're at that very moment takes so little time, really. It's just recreating a certain space within our buddhi, the greater mind, within our intention, which helps us to reach the higher mind. We are living in an era of such violent doings, breaking the barriers and sprawling naked into the open, all of the detritus of our time. We're living with endemic misinformation, and as someone said, outright disinformation. There's so many good actors helping this trend along, but the real impetus is the network of social and psychological forces that make people prone to believing and misbelieving misinformation and acting on all of these, whether they are the misinformation of what is going on or whether they're the truth, all of it in a mishmash, in a muddied, chaotic field. And just like years ago when I was living in New York City, and fast foods were becoming so prominent, and the various fast food entities were beginning to take over the city. In many years earlier, there was no such thing as the corner this and the corner that. And then all of a sudden, almost overnight, so many fast foods entities spawned its way into the city. And then, lo and behold, they would use some of the most amazing athletes, of course, African American athletes, to propagate these fast foods, so that those members of community, looking up to their hero and their idols, would subscribe to that poisonous fodder, really. Well, we haven't come a long way from there. Still, the New Age gurus, we have idolized so many. We have the model of great heroes and heroine in the New Age movement. And we too are subscribing to so much information that comes through the personas of these amazing idols that we have idealized. What I'm trying to say is that history is forever repeating herself, day in and day out. Newer forms, newer strategies, but the same old underpinnings, the same old endemic vile actions against our Mother Nature, against the nature of who we are. And I hold foremost, even above human love, even above the unconditional love of it all, I have always placed before that the greater gift that we all share and we all have, regardless of how darkened our lives have become, regardless of who becomes the perpetrator and victim in this entire story play. I've always held that our greatest gift of all in humanity is our sentiency, our understanding of awareness, our ability to become sentient and aware more and more so every day. Beneath the shallow surfaces of misinformation and all of these fantastic New Age, we can achieve this, we can achieve that, we can do this, is really, all there is behind it is judgmentalism. And these are usually emulated and channeled by well-meaning friends, by community folks, by some of our teachers, who have invested into the cursed ideology that being at odds or somewhat disheveled is a no-no. And not being in the center field of our own lives is a counterproductive thing. Well, it is not. It is called life. And we must carry on like performing seals and tigers, the scenario of appearing to be fine. Well, we are neither circus seals or tigers. We are sentient human beings, like the feral, divinely poised wolves. We too must refuse to do the circus acts. If you should have such folks in your circle, begin to prune the dead branches off your tree, as I've been doing in this last year. Rid yourself of the naysayers, the passive-aggressive folks, those who tell you can do better, but really mean that you're not doing so well as you are. Rid friends who resent or envy you, who cunningly sabotage your well-being, whose inferiority complex may bite into your own self-poise, including those members of your family. You may need to set some gentle distancing of yourself from all that consumes your energy in a way that makes you tired. Thank you ever so much for listening, and may peace be your journey.